I want you to picture a sound, a very specific hollow thud.
Okay.
It's the sound of a fist slamming down onto a big mahogany boardroom table.
I think anyone who's worked in a corporate setting for, what, more than a week,
Hmm.
they know that sound. And it usually means trouble.
Exactly. It's followed by this heavy silence. A manager points at a chart, maybe sales are down, maybe the error rate's up, or a software deployment just completely crashed.
The tension is palpable.
It is. And then comes the solution. What's the very first thing that manager says?
Oh, it's almost inevitable. These people don't know what they're doing. We need to retrain them.
It's the universal corporate reflex, isn't it? Something breaks.
Train the people.
Yep. Send them to a workshop, make them watch a video.
It's basically the corporate version of, has you tried turning it off and on again?
Right.
Except, it's way more expensive, takes up a ton of time, and here's the kicker, it's often completely ineffective.
That is the problem we are tackling today. Because what if that knee-jerk reaction, train the staff, is statistically wrong about 80% of the time?
Wow. That is a massive margin of error. If you were wrong 80% of the time in any other part of your business, you'd be fired.
And you would be. So today we're unpacking a really fascinating series of columns from Business Process Trends. They were written by a performance improvement veteran, Guy W. Wallace, between 2005 and 2007.
Right. And we're doing a deep dive into his methodology, which he calls EPPI.
Enterprise Process Performance Improvement.
I know. EPPI sounds like another flavor of corporate alphabet soup. But don't let the acronym scare you. This is not dry theory. Wallace is basically arguing that businesses fundamentally misunderstand the human variable.
How so?
Well, they're obsessed with fixing the person when they should be looking at the environment that the person is trapped in.
And that's the core tension we're going to explore. We are going to debunk the whole idea of competency as just a buzzword, and we're going to look at why square pegs and round holes is usually not the employee's fault. It's a failure of job design.
So let's get into the mechanics. Wallace starts by updating a classic tool, right? The Ishikawa diagram.
The fishbone diagram.
Right, because, well, it looks like a fish skeleton. If you've done any root cause analysis, any Six Sigma work, you've seen it. The traditional one asks you to look at 4 categories when things go wrong.
Men, materials, machines, and methods.
Exactly.
It feels very, Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Very factory floor, men and machines.
It is. It treats people as just another cog in the machine.
Yeah.
But Wallace updates this. He says if you want to really improve performance in a modern company, you can't just lump men or people in with machines.
Okay.
You have to divide the enablers, the things that make work possible, into 2 very distinct buckets: human assets and environmental assets.
All right, let's parse that because this distinction feels like the foundation for everything else. Human asset sounds a bit like HR jargon. What does he actually mean by that?
The human asset is strictly what resides inside the person. It's the stuff you take home with you at night.
Right.
Your knowledge, your skills, your physical attributes.
Like, can you lift 50 pounds? Do you have 20/20 vision? That kind of thing.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And your values. That's it. That's the human container.
So if I walk out of the building, the human assets walk out with me.
They walk out with you. Everything else,
Yeah.
literally everything outside of your skin, is an environmental asset. And Wallace groups these into what he calls EAMS.
Environmental asset management systems.
Right.
And this is where I think most managers get tripped up. They think environment is just, is the office too cold? Or is the coffee machine broken?
Sure. But Wallace's list is much more aggressive.
Yeah.
It's much more specific. It's basically a hierarchy of needs for any business process.
But what's on the list?
He breaks it down into these non-human enablers, and there's an order to them.
Right.
First up, data and information. Does the employee actually know what the target is? Do they have the specs?
Which sounds so basic, but how often have you started a project only to realize you didn't actually have the full brief?
All the time. Next is tools and equipment. Do I have the right software, the hammer, the truck? Then materials and supplies. Then facilities and grounds. Do I have a safe space to do the work?
Okay, those are all the physical things, but then it gets into the organizational stuff.
It does. Budget and headcount.
Yeah.
Do we actually have the money and the people to do this task? You can have the best tools in the world, but if you're understaffed by 50%, the process is going to fail.
Right.
And finally, the big one, culture and consequences.
Consequences is the one that really jumped out at me. Because when we hear that at work, we think punishment, like getting written up.
We do, but he means it in behavioral science sense. It's the feedback loop. Does the environment encourage the right behavior? If I do a great job, does the system notice and, reward me.
Or if I mess up, is there a correction? Or does nobody even care?
Exactly. Or even worse, if I do a great job, is my reward just a bigger pile of work?
It's a negative consequence for a positive behavior.
It is. And if those environmental factors, from data all the way down to consequences, if they're missing or broken, you could hire the most talented, highly trained genius in the world, and they will still fail.
And that leads us directly to that statistic I mentioned at the start, the 20% rule. Because if the environment is broken, training the person is. Well, what is it?
It's a complete waste of money. This is the absolute core of Wallace's argument. He says that instructional systems design, which is just the formal name for training, can only fix deficits in knowledge and skills.
Okay. So training fixes what's inside the person.
Correct. But in his experience, and looking at decades of data, knowledge and skill deficits only account for about 20% of the root causes of performance problems.
So let me just make sure I have the math right on this. If a team is failing or a process is broken, there's an 80% chance that the people know how to do the job, but
the data is bad, the tools are broken, the budget is missing, or the incentives are just perverse.
And yet, go back to that boardroom, the manager slams the table and says, train them. You are applying a solution that has a massive statistical probability of failing.
You're spending budget to fix a person who isn't broken, to put them back into a system that is broken.
It's like blaming the canary for dying in the coal mine instead of checking the gas levels.
That's a grim analogy, but it's dead on.
Yeah.
You can buy a stronger, healthier canary, but if the gas is toxic, you're just going to have another dead bird.
And that is the definition of a negative return on investment, a negative ROI. You're not just losing the money on the training, you're losing productivity while people are in the training, and you're losing the opportunity cost of not fixing the actual problem.
Right.
So if we accept that we shouldn't just guess and we shouldn't default to training, how do we diagnose this? How do I know if it's the person or the environment? Wallace doesn't just leave us hanging, he gives us tools.
He does. He's very big on seeing the invisible. You need data, and the first major tool he talks about is the performance model.
I looked at the example of this in the notes, and my first thought was, this looks a lot like a job description. How is it different from what I see on LinkedIn?
Well, a job description is usually a wish list. It's written by a manager or HR, and it's often vague, must be a good communicator, must be a self-starter. A performance model documents ideal mastery performance. And here's the key. Wallace doesn't write it. He doesn't guess.
So where does the data come from?
He gets it from the master performers. He gets the absolute best people who are currently doing the job, the rock stars, puts them in a room with the subject matter experts, and he facilitates a session. He asks them, what do you actually do? What are the outputs? What are the metrics?
So he's capturing reality, not theory. He's asking the people who are winning, how are you winning?
Exactly. He builds a gap analysis. He compares what the master performers do against what everyone else is doing. There's a really clear example in the source material about a convenience store manager.
Right, the hiring issue. Walk us through that.
Okay, so you have a chain of convenience stores. The output from the manager is new staff hired. The metrics are that the hiring needs to be timely and the staff need to be qualified.
Simple enough.
But the reality on the ground is a gap. There are too few candidates, or the people applying are terrible choices.
Okay, so the traditional boss looks at the store manager and says, you're bad at hiring. Go to a recruiting skills workshop. Learn to interview better.
That's the knee-jerk.
Yeah.
But the performance model forces you to ask about the probable gap cause. Is it a knowledge deficiency? Does the manager genuinely not know how to conduct an interview? Maybe. That's possible.
But what if it's environmental?
Exactly. Is the local economy booming so nobody wants to work for minimum wage? That's an environmental factor data about the market. Or did corporate give them a $0 ad budget? That's a resource factor.
And if the budget is zero or the wages are too low, that manager can sit in a recruiting seminar for a month. They can become the world's greatest interviewer.
It won't change a thing.
Because nobody is walking through the door.
It fixes nothing. And that's why the performance model is so critical. It forces you to categorize the barrier. Is it inside the person or is it outside in the EAMS? If it's outside, training is the wrong lever to pull.
It seems so obvious when you break it down like this, but organizations miss it constantly. They prefer the illusion of action, we ran a training, over the difficulty of actually fixing the environment.
Fixing the environment is hard. It means changing budgets, buying new tools, maybe even changing the culture. Training, it feels easier. It feels like you're doing something.
There's a second tool he mentions that pairs with this, right? The Enabler Matrix.
Yes. The performance model tells you what needs to be done. The Enabler Matrix links specific knowledge, skills, and attributes to those tasks. It's a giant grid.
And it's not just a checklist, it prioritizes things.
Totally. It weighs the skills. Let's stick with our store manager. To run the store, they need to know things like EEO laws, affirmative action, the company vacation policy. The matrix forces you to rank them. How critical is this? How volatile is it? Does the law change every year? And how hard is it to learn?
I see. So knowing the vacation policy might be low difficulty, it's just reading a document, but maybe high criticality if getting it wrong really upsets the staff.
Or high criticality on EEO, because if you mess that up, you get a lawsuit. And this helps decide how to train them. It determines the depth of training.
What do you mean by depth?
Do they just need awareness, like, hey, know this policy exists and where to find it? Or do they need fluency, knowing it by heart so they can recite it in a crisis?
That is a huge distinction because a lot of corporate training forces you to memorize things you could just look up.
Exactly. That's overtraining.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time. And on the flip side, you have undertraining, where you just mentioned a safety protocol once, when someone needs to know it intimately to avoid getting hurt. The enabler matrix prevents both. It's about precision.
Stop spray and pray training.
That's it.
Yeah.
And this precision ripples out to the bigger picture. Wallace identifies that managing people isn't just one department's job. He talks about HAMS, human asset management systems.
And again, this isn't just HR.
No. Wallace identifies 7 specific systems. It's a bit of a list, but they all matter. Organization and job design, staffing and succession, recruiting and selection, training and development, performance appraisal, compensation, and finally, rewards and recognition.
The Magnificent Seven.
You could say that. And here's a catch. Where most companies fail, all 7 of these systems must be driven by the same data.
The performance model we just talked about.
Yes. If they aren't, you get chaos. Imagine recruiting reads a job description that says, we need a creative innovator. So they hire this wild, creative thinker.
Okay.
But the training department has a curriculum that teaches strict adherence to the manual. And compensation is set up to bonus people based on error-free repetition.
Oh, wow. So the employee's stuck in the middle being pulled in 3 different directions. Be creative, follow the rules, and do it the same way every time.
Exactly. The systems are fighting each other, and the employee is the casualty.
And the place where this is most visible, and this was honestly my favorite part of the reading, is in job design.
Oh, absolutely. The Western States Forest Service's example. This really brings the human variable to life.
It's a perfect case study. So the scene is the Forest Service. Lots of trees, remote locations.
Right. And there's a role called Performance Improvement Consultant. The job description bundles a lot of tasks together, which is super common. A big part of the job is analyzing processes in the field, specifically the Firefighting and Watchtower Services Division.
Watchtower implies some altitude.
It does. To analyze the process, the consultant has to physically go to the work site, which means climbing 250 steps to get to the top of a watchtower.
250 steps? That is not a casual flight of stairs.
No. That requires significant physical stamina, leg strength,
Yeah.
and definitely not being afraid of heights.
Okay, so you need to be fit. That's a physical human asset, but that's not the whole job, right?
Not at all. The other half of the job is design and development. This means sitting at a desk, designing a solution, writing training materials, creating metrics. That requires high intellectual skill, instructional design knowledge, an eye for detail, but very low physical exertion.
So if you bundle all that into one job description, you are looking for a unicorn. You need someone who is a brilliant instructional designer and has the physical stamina of a firefighter.
And that creates the square peg issue. You're drastically limiting your hiring pool. You're looking for this super rare combination of traits. And when you can't find them, you say, there's a talent shortage.
But Wallace argues you should redesign the job based on the enablers.
Yes, he says. Stop looking for the unicorn. Yep. Split the role. Create Joby analysis and implementation. This person climbs the tower. They're the field agent. They need the legs. Then create Joby design and development. This person does the desk work. They need the instructional design chops.
And here's where it gets really interesting on the inclusion and accessibility front. This isn't just about efficiency.
No, the source specifically points this out. Once you split the job, Joby, the desk work, could now be filled by a highly talented individual who uses a wheelchair.
Right.
Under the old job design, that person was completely excluded because of the stair climbing requirement.
Even though they were perfectly capable of doing the intellectual design work, which was probably 80% of the value of the role anyway.
Exactly. By failing to design the job correctly, you're not just making it hard to hire, you are actively excluding talent. You're asking for these generic competencies must be fit and smart that don't actually match how the work could be done if you just organized it better.
It really challenges the whole idea of the ideal candidate. Sometimes the ideal candidate doesn't exist because the job itself is a Frankenstein's monster of conflicting requirements.
And this ripples out into everything, even things like staffing and succession planning.
How so?
Well, if you have that data from the performance model, you can predict the future. Wallace talks about predicting shrinkage and growth, especially in those remote locations like the Forest Service.
Right, where job stability is a huge deal.
A huge deal. People want to know there's a future for them. They don't want to move their family to a remote outpost just to hit a ceiling in 2 years. They want a roadmap that is, as Wallace puts it, rational, clear, and fair.
There was a great specific example of a career path, the senior watchtower observer.
Yes. So imagine you are a senior watchtower observer. You're at the top of your game, but you want to become the maintenance manager of the public golf course.
I love that jump. From watchtower to golf course, it sounds random,
Yeah.
but I guess in a big municipal system, that's a real career path.
It sounds random, but
Right.
it's a valid lateral move. The problem is, how does that employee know if they can do it?
Yeah.
Usually they don't. They apply, HR looks at their resume and says, you watch trees? What do you know about golf? And they get rejected.
But with EPPI, with the performance model,
If the system is working, the employee can look at the performance model for the golf course manager role. They can see the specific knowledge and skills required, not generic stuff like leadership, but specific things like irrigation system repair or turf management.
so they can self-assess. They can say, okay, I have the management skills from managing the tower, but I don't know a thing about sprinklers.
Exactly.
Right.
It identifies the gap. It lets the employee plan their own development. I need to go take a night class on hydraulics to be ready for that job. Without that data, succession planning is just guesswork or playing favorites.
It really all circles back to this idea that so many organizations are just flying blind. They're running on vague job titles and these generic leadership competencies that look good on a poster but don't actually describe the work.
That's a key takeaway.
Yeah.
Wallace warns against generic competencies. He says they're dangerous, they have face validity, they look correct on the surface. I mean, who would argue that leaders shouldn't be decisive and ethical and strategic? Nobody. But think about it. If your competency model would work just as well for your competitor as it does for you, it's not actually helping you win. It's just table stakes.
Because it's not specific to your processes.
It's not. You need data specific to your unique way of doing business. That is where the ROI, the return on investment, comes from. Wallace's bottom line is always ROI. If you're fixing the human variable training someone on generic leadership, when the variable that's broken is environmental, the tools, the job design, you are just burning cash.
It's the difference between being busy and being effective. You can be very busy running training workshops and printing certificates. But if the problem is the watchtower has too many stairs for your best designer, you haven't solved a thing.
Not a thing. And in today's world where everyone talks about efficiency and AI and optimization, this wisdom from 2005 is incredibly relevant. We so often blame the people trapped inside the design. We say they aren't agile enough.
And that's the thought I want to leave our listeners with today. It's a bit of a challenge. If your organization is in the middle of an improvement drive or a digital transformation, take a really hard look at what you're actually changing.
Ask yourself, are you actually improving the system and the environment? Are you fixing the EAMS? Or are you just demanding more resilience and more adaptability from the people who are trapped inside a broken design?
That's the question. The human variable is powerful, but it can't overcome a bad environment forever. Huge thanks to the insights of Guy W. Wallace for this timeless framework, and thank you, our listener, for tuning in to this deep dive.
Always a pleasure to get into the data.
We'll catch you on the next one. Keep asking the right questions.